Let's talk about then the state. So we're talking about, I guess, punishment for crime. But if we talk about the role of the state in general, what would your opinion be on the existence of the state? And I'm guessing you probably both will have slightly different perspectives on this. But Kevin, what's your perspective on that question?
Well, as being someone who was, born and raised with a state, it's kind of hard to imagine not having a state at all, right? I do support, ultimately, at some point in down the road, a voluntary society. I think that could eventually be achieved, but in my lifetime, I don't believe that's a possibility. I believe we should be taking the steps to work towards that. So, to begin with, we should start pulling back the rights of the states of overregulation, having, I can't even tell you how many agencies are within the U.S. government that are absolutely unnecessary. And even things like, things that they shouldn't even be dealing with, like the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division shouldn't even exist. Things like this. We have to start peeling these things back layer by layer. I think eventually, even within our lifetime, within my lifetime, I believe we could get to a point where we are almost like a minarchist society, where we are night watchmen, right? We have a society in which there is a government that exists, but only for the purposes of protecting us from outside forces and essentially protecting us from each other. We'll have court systems, some police to enforce these laws, but beyond that, there wouldn't be a whole lot. I don't think we need them involved in our schools, for instance. Like, some people may or may not know that in the United States, we have a Department of Education. I'm older than the Department of Education. So obviously for many years, we were able to do it without. We don't need it now. There's too much control. There's too much micromanaging by the federal government. And it does nothing but screw everything up. I mean, there's really no easy way to put it. There's no purpose for the government to be as big as it is. It needs to shrink, not by half, but by tenfold at minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way we're going, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in the UK where I'm in, everything is, we've got the National Health Service and pretty much everything is a state monopoly. I don't even know, private schools is a very sticky area. I'm not even sure if I know of that many of them, only a handful. But when I think about, I was thinking about Obamacare, and when that whole thing came out, I just thought, how on earth is this a good idea to have such a massive, federal program for healthcare when, sometimes even states can't even decide among themselves, what they want to do in their own state. So how is it a good idea to have a federal health program? Because not everyone just has different views. The states are too diverse, and I think there's so many different views. And that's the same for education, really. If one state wants to teach creationism for whatever reason and another state doesn't, then why should there be sort of a federal curriculum, that's standardized among all the states? It's too big a level. And this is the same really for the EU. That was our version of, I guess, what you could say is United States. Our federal government for a while was the European Union, and I'm personally glad to say the UK is leaving, but it's the same thing where people in Bulgaria have a vote on what the UK does. I think Bulgaria is in the EU anyway, but the point being that they have a vote on what we do with our own fishing waters. Why should someone in Slovakia be able to tell someone in Northern Ireland where they can fish? It's just it's crazy. But so how you would say, things like the Department of Education, even the Department of, is there a health department as well? Obviously, I'm assuming, how do these things even operate, when there's such diverse opinions within the government? So this is my question, and I don't know if there's any way that we'll be able to see these things start to be rolled back, but I'm not sure if it looks good just based on the way things are going at the minute, like you said.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, the thing is, they don't even know what they're doing half the time. I mean, there are organizations, and then they create organizations to watch over the other organizations. And the problem with
committees.
The way we are, at least, yes, with the way we are in the U.S., the problem with it is that everyone thinks they have the answer. So they want to get in power, and they're going to start giving you the answer, and they're going to put their solution in place. The problem is when they leave office, that solution doesn't go away. And then we just keep adding to it and adding to it. And now we've gotten to the point where no one even knows what anything is going on. There are, especially with the COVID-19 going on right now, right? We have people demanding that the federal government do certain things which aren't in their power. And we have other people on the state level who are demanding like citizens demanding the state do things that aren't on their power. And no one seems to know who's in control of what. and it's complete chaos. I mean, it's gotten better now as time's gone on, obviously, but originally, for the first 2 months, it was literally chaos here when it came to deciding who was in charge of what, who could say what, who could imply, put restrictions on or recommendations on, and it's just proven that obviously the government's too big. The question is, how small can we get, and how quickly can we do it?
And I guess the shame of local governors that they all they all looked up at Trump to see what's the president going to tell us, what's he going to tell us to do, and that's, I mean, it should be considered by default that they're in charge if the federal government hasn't told them otherwise. Not that that's right in the first place, but they all seem to immediately just look up like lemmings, really. Just at like they were sheep. What's the government going to tell me to do? What am I going to be told to do for my state? And I guess it's a shame that was the way things kind of panned out. But it was crazy to see from over here even how that was handled, because at least, rightly or wrongly, you could say in the UK the Prime Minister just kind of says what to do, and the Health Minister just said tell everyone what to do, and there's a clear message. It gets a bit sticky in terms of devolved governments, in terms of Northern Ireland having its own rules and Scotland having its own rules, but all in all, the Prime Minister tends to set the policy for the country. But how then would you say that the COVID thing is being handled a bit better now on the whole? Have people kind of figured out what's going on?
Well, I don't know if people have figured it out. I don't know if it's handling better. I think people are just so tired of it, they don't care. So they either go along with things they don't care or agree with because they're just going to do it so they don't have any problems. And then other people are seeing signs that things seem to be dissipating. Some things seem to be improving. People are able to go back to school. Sports are starting. So people are feeling some sense of normalcy. So because of that, I think that's just more of a feel-good type thing. It's not necessarily a better thing, but sometimes that's what you need in a situation like this, is you need people to feel better or feel like things are improving, just because that way their attitudes will change. And once attitudes change, then other things can change. Now, I'm someone with a medical background. I'm someone who's actually worked on a pandemic before, back in 2009. When I was in healthcare, I was in infection control. I was actually on a regional-wide portion of the National Task Force. So I have inklings of what's going on, and I understand why things are being done. The problem is I don't agree with most anything, and the problem is it doesn't seem like anybody agrees, because everyone's getting their information from different sources. You go to a news media, they're saying one thing. You go to your state government, they're saying another thing. You go to the federal government and in the task force with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, we're saying one thing, but yet your county, like I live in by Chicago, we have a very large area, and we have obviously the politics are very large here, and in Cook County we have health department that are saying something contradicting the governor, which is contradicting the federal government. So it's like no one knows who to trust. No one knows who to put their value in when it comes to an opinion, or how they should behave, or who they should trust. The problem is with all this is it was avoidable. And again, what got in the way was politics. Everyone had an agenda. Now, may it be I'm on the Democrats and I want to get Trump out of office, or it might be I'm a conservative and I want to make our Democratic governor and mayor look bad. I mean, who knows everyone had their own reason behind what they were doing, but politics got in the way. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to dissipate anytime soon, especially with a presidential election coming up now just in a couple months.
Yeah. So I'm going to pass over to you, Q, then. So if we go back to in terms of the role of the state, then what would your opinion be on that question?
For what the state should do
in general. So we got a little bit sidetracked there in terms of talking about health particularly, but when we talk about these departments, health, education departments, and all the other ones, ATF and
torpedo them. They shouldn't exist at all. In my mind, the highest office in the land should be like your local mayor, right? Like everything else should just be. And that's just because of the community that you live in. You want to elect somebody to help kind of manage some of the day-to-day details. But
is that in terms of the highest office that you should have to deal with, or the highest office that should exist?
That should exist, yeah.
Oh, so the president is out then?
Oh, yeah, the whole federal government, get rid of it, dissolve it. States, lines, boundaries, borders, it's all imaginary, right? So, it is. We're all playing a game. We're all playing a game. So, Now that leads up to a lot of questions, and it comes down to rights and responsibilities, right? Everybody has rights and everybody has responsibilities, and you have the responsibility to defend yourself, defend your community. You have a responsibility to work with each other in a non-violent way, and if that can't be achieved, then you have the responsibility to walk away or defend yourself if it becomes a problem. So there's a lot of details that go into that, and a lot of questions that can't necessarily always be answered cleanly. Mm-hmm. But I go back to slavery, right? People couldn't imagine who was going to pick all the cotton if we didn't if we abolished slavery. Like, I can't, like, if you own a plantation, you have all these acres and acres of tobacco and cotton, mm-hmm. and you have, for lack of a better word, a stable of slaves that just go out and do the work for you. Your entire economy is based off of slave labor. It's going to be hard for you to imagine how you're going to get all of this cotton picked mm-hmm. if I don't have slaves doing it. So there's always going to be a question, and arguably the greatest question is who's going to pave the roads, right? We always hear that one, what about my roads? Everything is like that. It's like, well, I don't know, but there's a market, and somebody will come up with a great idea. And maybe we don't even need roads. Maybe we don't even need a Department of Education. Mm-hmm. You look at how some of these kids are raised. We're basically turning over our future to the state, and then we want to know why we have these blind loyalists to the crown, so to speak, right? To use an old, American, mm-hmm. Colonial term, right? So we have blind loyalists to the crown because the state is training them to be that. I'd like to see it all go away. How do you do that nonviolently? Dude, I don't know. So I don't have an answer how to get there, man. I just,
The next question is, if you have I guess this is all, it doesn't really make sense anyway in terms of how we've got to the situation, but I'm thinking of like Pearl Harbor. If something like that happens and a kind of malevolent rogue actor, a nation of another country just goes and bombs, rural Missouri, is there any, in your mind, justification for a kind of grouping together of these states for common defense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We should cooperatively defend each other, absolutely. But so going back to Pearl Harbor, right? I'm glad you brought it up. There's a quote that was attributed to the Japanese admiral at the time, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And there's some debate of whether or not he ever said it, but the premise is true. We cannot defend the American mainland because there's a rifle behind every blade of grass, and that's to me that's it. That's the answer, mm-hmm. right? Like, be able to defend yourself, be able to defend your community, be in a close relationship with your friends and your allies, and live peaceably amongst one another. And if there's something going on that isn't right, well, maybe we need to take care of it.
Well, when you think of the battleships and the aircraft carriers, then do they get built in a cooperative society?
So you had private. So going back to the American Revolution, you had private people owning warships. Right. You had the privateers, basically pirates. Yeah. Defeated the British Royal Navy.
This is true.
So I mean, it's not like it's unheard of, my man. So it's just unheard of
in a modern world. I guess is where I'm going with this. Is it as feasible today as it was back in? And I guess it's wrong to say those sort of ships were primitive, but in more primitive compared to today's society. I mean, I guess when I think about it, the market tends to produce better solutions than government ever could. We'll probably end up with supercharged, aircraft carriers that can fly if we left it to the markets, to be honest. But
so like you already have a fleet of ships that are owned by private organizations, right? Your shipping companies and all mm-hmm. these other guys. Yeah. The U.S. government doesn't own Matson, right? They don't own Young Brothers. They don't own. These are just ships that come out here to Hawaii, right? Like so, there might be a corporatist agreement between these, the corporation and the government, and that's a whole different episode. I'm sure we could talk about that. But you already have private ownership of ships, big ships with lots of capabilities, but they're built without defensive measures because that's just been outsourced to the federal government. It's not as if we couldn't do it. It's just that we're not doing it.
Yeah.